And then we had
Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Scott Ritter and Diane Sare, and Scott is going to talk about his upcoming trip to Russia. So, Scott, this has been in the planning stages for a while. You're going to see many cities. What do you hope to accomplish on this trip to Russia?
well, this is the third leg in a what has turned out to be a trilogy of visits to Russia, part of what I'm calling the Waging Peace Project. And so, what do I hope to accomplish? Wage
Yeah.
peace. This dates back to a year ago in May of last year. I went to Russia for the first time since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And the purpose of that trip was to engage your average Russians in conversations about who we are and what we are collectively as human beings, to learn more about Russia, to learn about the Russian people, the culture. Um, the Russian soul is something that's always talked about. Dostoevsky has famously written about it. I think if you read the brothers Karamazov and such, you'll see that the discussions take place. Tolstoy. You go into Russian literature, the complexity of the Russian people and their history and such. To try and capture that and then bring it back to the United States in a way that I used to use the term a vaccine, but that's a politically charged term. So what I speak of now is an antidote to the poison of Russophobia that has gripped the United States. We live in a nation of people. It's interesting as you go on in life. I learn from people every time. I mean, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I'm an old dog, and people keep teaching me new tricks. Ray McGovern taught me a long time ago. Because I'm a quote unquote Russian expert. I was one of those Sovietologists. I was one of those people that did the deep dive, and I got it mostly right. I was pretty good, but I was always very skeptical of official Russian statements. I was just, so I was looking to read the tea leaves. And Ray was like, and Ray's job was to brief presidents of the United States on Russia. And Ray said, Scott, the Russians are telling you exactly what they're going to do. Read their newspapers, listen to their TV broadcasts, their radio broadcasts. They lay it out there. They don't lie. They don't spend their whole day trying to spin things and propagandize to themselves. They just put it all out there. And Ray was right. And had I done that, it would have simplified my approach of studying Russia tremendously. I did a podcast with Dennis Kucinich the other day, a wonderful man, running for the 7th congressional district in Ohio as an independent. And I'm just a hot-headed Marine. And sometimes I get angry and I say things like, "Oh, the American people are sheep. The American people are stupid. The American people are this. The American people are that." And Dennis was like, "The American people are good people, Scott. They're very good people." Um, he said, "If there's any problem with the American people, is that they're too trusting. That they trust people, and when people promote themselves in a leadership position." The American and promote themselves as experts, the American people want to believe them and want to trust them. And what we have right now is an American population that's good. And I've always said this: American people are good people. In their hearts, they're some of the best people in the world. We talk about the Russian soul. Americans don't have a soul because we're not a homogeneous entity, but we have an idea, and we buy into this idea of freedom, this idea of individual rights, and it's a great idea. And we want to believe the people that we vote into office to do the right thing. And we right now have a system of government that's populated by people who can only promote themselves by exploiting the ignorance of the American people about certain things, in this case, Russia. We don't know about Russia, so we're ignorant of it. maybe there's a more politically correct term. I'm not trying to insult anybody. We don't know enough about Russia. And so from this lack of knowledge and understanding comes fear, because you fear that which you don't understand, especially when it's promoted to you in a way that makes it look like that which you don't understand is threatening you. And that fear then is used by the politicians then to promulgate policies that are bringing us, as we speak, on the brink of nuclear conflict. One of my great fears of this trip is that I'm not coming home. And there may not be a home for me to come to. And I'm not exaggerating right now. You literally just had a major Russian. You had Dmitry Medvedev, former president of Russia, a senior national security advisor to Vladimir Putin, basically put Europe on notice. We are going to nuke you. We are going to nuke you. There is no question about it. If you do what you say you're going to do, we are going to drop nuclear bombs on you. And we will also nuke America, because he said there are targets that we can't reach with our tactical nuclear weapons. So the strategic component will come into play. Hello, America. You've just become a nuclear target overnight. You didn't know that? What do you think was happening? You're all focused on Donald Trump being convicted on 34 felony accounts. Why weren't you focused on the Biden administration saying we just greenlit Ukraine using American long-range weapons to strike targets inside Russia, understanding that none of those targets can function unless they've been programmed with the targeting data by American technicians receiving intelligence data from American satellites transmitted by American armed forces, that America is attacking Russia as we speak. ATACMS missiles hit the Russian bridge in Crimea. And the Russians have said, you can't do that. That's like Russia using missiles to strike the Tappan Zee Bridge, or what used to be known as the Como Bridge or the Verrazano Straits Bridge. We wouldn't allow that to happen, but we just allowed Ukraine to use our weapons, which we targeted, to strike a bridge. And this is going to lead to an inevitable retaliation. And Russia has said, we are going to hit you. And it's not going to be in Ukraine. The nations that are responsible for this will be struck. And then if they decide to implement Article 5 and make it a NATO thing and strike Russia, the next step is that Russia will immediately respond with nuclear weapons, immediately respond. There's not going to be a phone call. There's not going to be, time for people to debate it on TV. It's just going to go boom. And it's all over. And this is happening right now as we speak. The decision-making cycles are in play as we speak. I may not even get on an airplane, because the world could come to an end right now, today. You asked me what I'm trying to do in Russia. Stop this, prevent this. All right. But my approach is a long-term approach. It has to be. You can't change the psychology of the American people overnight. Their brains have been polluted with anti-Russian propaganda. So they accept at face value anything they're told by their government about Russia and how evil Russia is. The only way to defeat this, to come up with this antidote, is to go to Russia, to meet the Russians, work with the Russians. And the interesting thing about this is, in May, when I went there, it was sort of like an introductory meeting between me and the Russians. We were dancing around. Look, I'm a former intelligence officer who's received 2 classified commendations from the director of the CIA for my intelligence work inside the Soviet Union. Oh, you were a spy. No, I was an intelligence officer serving my country. But from the Russian perspective, they're like, he was a former intelligence officer who used to work on Russian soil, and he got 2 commendations from the director of the CIA about things we were, do we really want to trust this guy? And so May was a little bit of a, let's see what's going on here kind of thing. I think the Russians liked what they saw. They liked what I was saying. They liked what I was trying to do. I went back in December and January for the second leg of it. And the purpose of the second leg was, one, to try and delve deeper into this Russian soul thing. What does it mean? And so I explored Russian culture. New Year's and the Orthodox Christmas are big deals in Russia. The Russian winter, that's part of the Russian, you can't just talk about Russia, let's talk about the winter, to experience it firsthand. And then I went on a very important tour. I call it Russia's Path of Redemption. And basically, it takes you from Chechnya to Crimea to the new Russian territories of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk. Because this is the heart of what we're talking about. when we talk about the potential of conflict, it's what Russia is doing in this region and how the West is responding to that, and why Russia began to do it anyways, to understand the nature of this. You start in Chechnya because people say that the Russia and Ukraine are permanently damaged. They can never be repaired. And I try and remind people that, if you go back to the late 1990s, early 2000s, Russia and Chechnya were permanently damaged at war. If you looked at Grozny, the city, it looked like Stalingrad, totally leveled. You go there today, it's totally rebuilt. Not just a new city with new buildings, but a nation, an autonomous nation, the Chechen Republic, that lives in peace with the Russians as part of the Russian Federation. And the Chechens provide considerable military support to Russia in support of what's going on in Ukraine. Chechens and Russians aren't fighting against each other. They're fighting side by side with each other. And the point I'm trying to make is that that's the future of Russia and Ukraine if we just get out of the way. That Russia and Ukraine not only can live in peace and harmony, they have in the past and they will again in the future once we remove the poison of the West from the Ukrainian problem. So I start there. I call it the Chechen miracle, and we could very well have a Ukrainian miracle. But how do you take the theory of Chechen recovery into the reality? You go to Crimea. That was the next thing. I drove into Crimea over the Crimea Bridge, the one that was just attacked. I met with the governor of Crimea. We talked about how, the reality of Crimea, that it is Russia. There's no if, and, or but about this. It is Russia, will always be Russia. I met with Crimean Tatars. We talked about that. We talked about how Crimea is rebuilding even during this time of conflict, and that the future of Crimea is a very bright future indeed. And then I went into the new territories: Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Lugansk. I met with the governors. I met with military officials, and I just saw firsthand, what this war has done to that region, and what the Russians there are doing, because they now are part of Russia. Are doing to rebuild and to bring an end to this conflict. And the whole thing was sort of this path of redemption aspect to it. And I thought that might be enough. I thought that I could come back and that might be enough. But then Tucker Carlson went and interviewed Vladimir Putin. And first of all, I had to get over my jealousy, interview with Putin. But, he's a journalist. I'm not. So he got it and I watched it. 1 billion people watched it. That in itself says, good job, Tucker. But then he with good intent, tried to sell Russia to the American audience, sort of doing what I was doing, but in a more colloquial fashion, we'll say. And he went into the metro, he went to a store, and some of the pushback that came back was, yeah, but Tucker, that's Moscow. The Russians are pouring a lot of money into Moscow. Anybody can put lipstick on a pig and make it look good. But the real Russia, when you get outside of Moscow, the real Russia, it sucks. It's horrible. It's a dictatorship. The Russian people don't have toilets. They don't have any of this. And I'm sitting there going, well, gosh, I was in the real Russia. I was there in May. My 26-day, 12-city book tour that served as the heart of that tour was about going to places that weren't called Moscow and St. Petersburg. I did go to Moscow and St. Petersburg. And I went to a whole bunch of other places too. And I'm like, well, okay, we have to go on a real Russia tour. And I contacted my good friend Alexander Zyryanov, this Russian businessman who has been a big proponent of this. He's the one who reached out to me. He sent me the letter. When you talk about Russian American history, I talk about Van Cliburn, this Texan pianist who went there in 1958, won the hearts and minds of the Russians by winning the Tchaikovsky Music Festival, and the potential that he had, the leadership by example, going to Russia, doing this. I talk about Samantha Smith. She wrote a letter to Yuri Andropov in 1982 saying, I don't want to have a nuclear war. And he wrote back and said, I don't want one either. And he invited her over. Alexander Zyryanov wrote a letter to me in 2022, basically saying the same thing. We don't want a nuclear war. We want peace. And we want you to come to Russia and see this. And he began this process. So he is the Russian version of Samantha Smith, writing a letter that brought this into place. He's an important component of this. None of this would happen without Alexander Zyryanov's vision and courage. It's not easy to go against the grain anywhere. in Russia and the United States. And right now, the prevailing trend in Russia is not to be friends with the United States. Why would you want to be friends with a nation that seeks your strategic defeat? But Alexander Zhiryanov understands, that peace and prosperity requires this kind of friendship. And he invited me over both in May and in December and January. And now he's invited me this time as well. And I told him, I said, we need to see Russia from the Pacific Ocean to the Baltic Sea and everything in between. And we got to capture this and bring it to the American people. This is the third and final leg of the waging peace effort. And so we're going, and we're going to a variety of cities. Look, for security reasons, I can't say what our exact schedule is or even what the cities are, because unfortunately, as Diane is fully aware, we have our names on certain lists. And on those lists, there's people that claim that they want to kill us. And those people are affiliated with Ukrainian intelligence service, which has unfortunately shown an ability to reach inside Russia and kill people. So I'm not fearful, but I'm also smart enough to know that if somebody says they want to kill you and they've shown an ability to go in to a certain place and kill, you don't want to sit there and say, oh, well, I'm going to be in this city on this date at this location. But that's okay. I don't think you're going to try and kill me. You just don't want to make it. It's not just about me. Like I said, I'm 62. If I died tomorrow, I had a long and good life. I'd like to be a little bit more productive, get a couple things more done, like stop a nuclear war. But, if I go, I go. But my job isn't to endanger other people. And there's a whole bunch of really good Russian people that would like to come and meet and talk. And I don't want to create a target for Ukrainian intelligence. We saw they can go in. They use other actors like these Tajik terrorists to attack, the concert hall in Moscow with tragic consequences. And so you just don't want to make it easy for them. So we're not going to, but we're making up for it in other ways. For instance, we've spent a lot of money putting in place a video production capability that I'll start exercising in St. Petersburg as soon as I get there. To produce, not every day, but maybe every other day, 5 to 7 minute short video of what's going on for the day, who we met, and things like that. And I'm bringing my co-host of my podcast, Ask the Inspector, Jeff Norman, in with me. And we're going to be doing Ask the Inspector from inside Russia, from all these different locations. And we're going to be meeting interesting people. And this time we are, one of the things that was interesting about the December, January trip is that we incorporated not just meetings with Russian people, but with Russian leadership. I had a meeting with Ramzan Kadyrov, the head of the Chechen Republic. I met with the governor of Crimea. I met with the governor of Kherson. I met with the governor of Donetsk. And we're hoping on this trip to also meet with regional and national leaders to have this kind of conversation, not just about, Russian and American people like each other. We have a component of that too. We call the Pen Pal Project. And we're going to be facilitating connectivity between American families and Russian families to begin the kind of conversations that need to happen, so that an antidote to the poison of Russophobia can be produced. But we're going to be doing this aspect, but we're also going to be meeting with Russian officials and hopefully at least putting a marker on the table that says, give peace a chance, that the American people are worth the effort. That I know you might be frustrated with the government. A lot of Americans are frustrated with their government too. But the government, if we remember Abraham Lincoln, it's government of the people, by the people, for the people. It's about the people, not about the government. And don't give up on the American people. The American people, as Dennis Kucinich said, are good people. They're honest people. They'll give you the shirt off their back if you give them a chance. All we have to do is put the right people in charge so that their trust is not misplaced. Get the right people like Diane Sare, for instance, get her into the U.S. Senate. We start to, kick out these this poison that has infected the American people's house, the Congress of the United States. We have to start purging Congress of these poisonous people and start putting in people who are committed to doing the right thing. It takes time. The election cycle is a reality. And what we're going to tell the Russian government is, I can't make policy. I'm not going to violate the Logan Act. I'm not there to, pretend that I'm something that I'm not. I don't make arms control policy. But what I can say is I am an American citizen. And I believe that I represent a prevailing mood in America that wants peace, that desires peace, is capable of living peace with Russia. Give us a chance. Don't give up on us, because right now the big danger in Russia isn't that they're going to go to war with us tomorrow. I mean, that of course is a big danger, but the Russians don't want to go to war. They really don't want to go to war. Why would they? Vladimir Putin just spent a quarter century rebuilding Russia into this wonderful country that it is today, that I'm going to try and capture and bring back and show the American people. The Russians aren't suicidal. As I said, they want the same things you and I want. They want to raise their family in peace. They want a better future for their children. They want jobs. They want, a life that's worth living. Why would you throw that away with nuclear war? So it's not that the Russians are bending over backwards trying to go to war with America, but even if we can avoid this nuclear conflict today, the Russians, I think, are just starting to say America doesn't matter to us anymore. That rather than try and work with America, we're going to work without America, that we're just not going to deal with America. There's nothing constructive that comes from relationships with America. And while I understand the Russian position, that's a dangerous thing for both them and us. When nations don't talk, we come back to the basic principle of what I'm trying to accomplish here, which is to overcome ignorance-based fear. If we stop talking to one another in both nations, what will happen is we will not know what the other side's thinking, doing. And that creates ignorance. That creates fear. And now we'll have two nuclear armed powers living in fear of one another at a moment when the world's going through this transition from American hegemony to a multilateral, existence that America finds many Americans, government officials, view as an existential threat. So if we're not communicating with the Russians, this transition could lead to people believing that Russia's a threat worthy of war. And now we're back to that creation of war. Russia needs to maintain connectivity with America. But in order to do that, because connectivity is a two-way street, it's not a one-way street, Americans have to show that they're willing, ready, and able to connect with the Russians. And that's what I'm trying to accomplish on this trip, is to demonstrate that we can connect and that the connection that we create is positive in nature. It's a human-to-human connection that, if given a chance to breathe and grow and reach fruition, can actually lead to the conditions that promote peace, prosperity, and cooperation. That's the future. That's the only future we should be aspiring to. That's a long way of saying what I'm trying to do on this trip. It's a big task. It's a big trip. We'll be gone for 40 days. But what the hell else am I supposed to do right now? Am I supposed to sit at home and enjoy the wonderful summer of upstate New York, knowing that if I don't do anything, the likelihood of nuclear conflict between the United States and Russia is real? I don't want to oversell me or this, but I honestly believe that this Waging Peace project has the potential of contributing in a meaningful way to the prevention of nuclear Armageddon. And so I'm fully committed. I'm all in, as they like to say in Texas Hold'em. All my chips are on the table.
Diane, you are going to be running for the United States Senate as an independent candidate. You accomplished something amazing, getting the number of signatures that you got. In your conversations with people who signed your petition, did anybody have a conversation with you about the dire situation between Russia and the United States? Do people in this country understand what the consequences are if we don't understand what's going on in both countries?
Well, I appreciate that question, and really not enough. And I would say that Scott and I have different roles to play in the same end, because the American people, while I also believe they are fundamentally good and have goodwill, they are horribly brainwashed. And as people know, fear is the first tool in brainwashing somebody. You have to make them insecure. You have to kind of take away the solid ground that people think they're standing on, so that then they will be groping and grasping for ideas. And one of the ways that we saw this in the campaign is that people who were gut-wrenched about the genocide being perpetrated by the Netanyahu regime backed by the US in Gaza thought nonetheless that what we were doing in arming Ukraine is correct. And I was a little surprised when we were petitioning. And let me just say, I am the only person who has now done this twice. We filed approximately 70,000 signatures. I did not hire any agencies to assist me. This was a volunteer effort of dedicated people who recognize the danger. So I can't say that too few people recognize the danger, because we, to get those signatures, probably had conversations with 250,000 or 300,000 people in New York. Myself and Jose Vega, who just got on the ballot running against Richie Torres in the Bronx. But I did find it odd when you would say, they'd say, well, what do you stand for? And I would say, peace. And people would look at you cross-eyed. What? Or in one case, they were just very honest. I said, I'm for peace. And they said, well, I'm for Israel. So that was clear. But people are not aware of the danger, or they would say in Manhattan in particular, well, I agree. I would say, look, I would never have voted for that $95 billion weapons package of arms to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. And then on top of that, voted for warrantless spying on the American people. And people would say, well, I'm for peace, but sometimes we have to support war. And I think Ukraine really needs our help. And of course, we know that we are not helping Ukraine. Ukraine is being ground up like hamburger meat. There are towns where there are virtually no young men left. The place is destroyed. It's destroyed economically. We are not helping Ukraine. This is just a figment. So we have to, in a sense, deprogram people. And I think one of the things I really want to focus on to help people find a grounding is to consider the future. Where should the United States be in 50 years? Can you remember, and anyone under the age of 50 or maybe even 60 probably can't even remember a time when one person working 40 hours a week could easily support a family of 4 or 5 or 6 people, could pay their mortgage, could pay their property taxes, their health insurance, and they had good health insurance, and they had a hospital nearby that actually wanted to take care of them, as opposed to putting them on a morphine drip and killing them off because it saved money. You know, we could be a force for good in the world. And we are coming up on the 250th anniversary of our revolution against the British Empire, which was a very good thing for the world. If you read the writings of the German poet Friedrich Schiller after the American Revolution, he was so optimistic. They said, finally, someone has created a model for mankind to govern itself. We defeated the British Empire. No one had done that. And unfortunately, through a series of events, perhaps the most egregious in recent history being the Kennedy assassination and the toleration for the cover-up of who did that, which means that the people who did that are still running the country, we lost our way. We don't really know what our nation is supposed to be anymore. So as a candidate, I think my job is to provide a certain kind of leadership to the American people that allows them to begin to consider how they themselves allowed our nation to go down this wrong path, where we could literally have the greatest crisis our nation has faced and not have a single presidential candidate who is really qualified to meet the crisis. You can say there are gradations or some are better than worse. Biden is certainly a horrific disaster. But how do we get to this point? Out of 330 million people, we couldn't find an Abraham Lincoln, a Franklin Roosevelt, a John F. Kennedy. Really? Well, that has to do with us. We have to take responsibility for that. All of us are not in jail. You can go to your congressman's town hall meeting and speak your mind. You can go out in the street. It's true, there are very brutal police crackdowns on students at the campuses, but we still have an ability to speak. I was able to bust my rear end and a bunch of other people's to get these 70,000 signatures to get on the ballot. And I'll tell you, it was a lot harder this time than last time. Because people have been made so psychotic by the electoral process and what's happening with the presidential elections, and the crisis and the hyperinflation. I think people really feel they're in a kind of huddled, beaten down mode where they can't think straight. But so there's an enormous job to do. I think there's an openness. I think there's a willingness. I think people are anguished about the genocide in Gaza because they care about stopping genocide. And as Scott said, they're ignorant. They don't know what life is like for people on the ground in Ukraine now with our great help for Ukraine. So we have to bring that to them, but also from the standpoint that there is a solution to this. We don't all have to go to hell. There is a way out of it. And perhaps if we would remember what our nation was supposed to be, we could find a pathway to change what we're doing right now.
I've got a question, Scott, I'd like you to start. Charlotte Dennett, who wrote a book called Follow the Pipelines, and it's about how oil is the major factor in all of these conflicts that are going on. You could go to Russia, you could get millions of people to be pen pals with millions of people in the United States. But if the warmongers proceed in, not, I'm sorry, proceed in pursuing their agenda, no matter what you do, will not really solve the problem. What do you say to that?
I mean, I don't believe there's any one single cause of conflict in the world today. So while I recognize the importance of energy security, I've been working for an energy intelligence organization for going on a quarter of a century now. So I know a thing or two about pipelines, pipeline security, and the role of oil and gas in the global hierarchy. There's a lot of other things that go into conflicts as well. And let's just put it this way. I mean, we know, for instance, we have Nord Stream pipeline connectivity. We have the Russian pipelines going into Europe. We have Turk Stream coming in. We have the growing potential of gas coming out of the Eastern Mediterranean. The oil, the gas fields off the coast of Israel are play a role. All of this plays in, but it's resources can be managed if people want to manage them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the oil and gas that causes the war. It's not pipelines that cause the war. It's people that cause the war. There is a way to manage global resources so that there's an equitable distribution to all parties involved. This requires a multilateral approach. If pipelines were the cause of all conflict, then you're telling me BRICS will never work. BRICS, of course, being the five-nation economic forum, because why even bother? Screw it. Let's just shut down the UN because pipelines cause conflict. And therefore, there's no reason to even try. Pipelines don't cause conflict. People cause conflict.
Okay.
People use issues to promote conflict. And energy security is about money. It's not the pipeline that causes the conflict. It's not the oil or the gas in the pipeline. It's the enormous wealth that's attached to that. and who controls that wealth. And that's the issue. And again, a lot of it deals with the hegemony of the United States, how the United States uses American-based multinational energy corporations to, dominate global economic activity. The petrodollar, I mean, just literally what I just said, the petrodollar is a dominating factor that can't be ignored in the global economic reality of today. But we're transitioning away from that. And I think that there's a whole bunch of nations in the world today that aren't going to let the oil and the gas that is being transported by pipelines and ships serve as a starting point for conflict. That they're going to learn to work around these issues, come up with equitable solutions. The problem isn't the pipelines. The problem isn't the gas. The problem isn't the oil. The problem is the United States. That's the problem. And again, if we can get people like Diane in the United States Senate to start promulgating sound policies that take into account that America is but one nation, a big nation, a powerful nation, an important nation, but one nation amongst many that populate this little blue marble we call Earth, then we won't have to worry about, pipelines and oil and gas serving as the basis of conflict. We can actually work towards, what was that word you were using, Diane? Peace. Yeah, amazing. If you put where you put your priorities. So I respect the emphasis that was placed on pipelines, but no, pipelines don't cause war. People cause war. People can prevent war. People can promote peace. Diane said it.
Yeah,
Right.
I just would like to say, take a look at the timeline of the BRICS developments, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, as people know, but they had just had this huge meeting in South Africa, and Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Ethiopia, Argentina, which didn't because they elected a crazy man, but at any rate, you have a whole block of nations invited to become part of this BRICS or BRICS Plus. Where are they? Where is Israel? Where is Palestine? Wasn't it convenient that you blew this whole thing up on October 7th, right in the middle of this new coordination among nations? And I think the meetings that Xi Jinping is having with President al-Sisi of Egypt and others, and this is one of the things that we really have to get across to Americans. Scott just addressed it. We are not the global hegemon that you may think that we are. What do we have to offer people? What do people gain by working with China or Russia or others? Russia is working with Egypt to build one of the largest or the largest nuclear power plant in Africa. I think it's 4 reactors, if I'm correct. Egypt is building a whole new city. China's building deep water ports, modern high-speed rail. So if you work with those nations, there's a chance that you're going to be building major infrastructure, lifting people out of poverty, having a basis to resolve conflicts. If you're an ally of the United States, what do you get? Oh, we'll poke our fingers in your eye, kick you in your privates, and cut off all your food. Well, gee, I don't know what do I want to do here? So the actions of the United States have made ourselves fairly irrelevant. We're very dangerous because of the delusional arrogance that we still run things, but in terms of the shift in the world, it's massive. And again, if we were in our right mind, we would be cheering when African nations kick the French military out. We would be saying, this is the spirit of the American Revolution. You're going to have your freedom. You're creating a republic. We're going to trade with you. We're going to work with you. But that is not the view of the people currently making policy in our country right now.
Scott, you make it sound so easy, kick out all the guys that are there and elect a bunch of new people that would promote peace. It's a club. It's a club that I know very well. And the people that are there, they will keep out all outsiders at any cost. Right, Diane?
Well, they'll do their best, but the Berlin Wall did come down somehow, and many people thought that was impossible, and it had to do with an economic collapse and various other factors. So I don't know how things are going to change in the United States. I know they must if we intend to survive. And so I have faith really because of my own determination. I mean, that's what I have faith in. It's not in anyone else. It's that I am not giving up fighting because it's necessary. And I think Scott has a similar spirit. That's why you don't become pessimistic. Pessimism isn't caused by something outside of yourself. It comes from yourself giving up. If you know that you are not giving up, then you have reason to be optimistic.
Cynthia, you talk about a club.
Yes.
When back when I was relevant and doing things that people cared about in clubs around the country, I'd be invited to these clubs. I won't go. I won't name them. I mean, but I'd go to big clubs that were in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'd go to clubs that were in New York City. I'd go into clubs that were in Washington D.C. and Philadelphia, and they were all populated by very musty smelling old men who sat there and they had their cigars and they had their drinks. And every once in a while, if they were progressive, they'd let the ladies come in and sit in the corner and look ladylike. But then the ladies would have to leave because the club would sit there and talk about the important things and how important they are. And I look at those clubs today and they stink. Literally, they stink. Musty smell because there's nothing new about these clubs. There's no new blood in there. People like me who were brought in, most people took a look at the club and said, "That's not me. That's not who I am." And there's new clubs out there. They don't promote themselves like the old clubs. They don't have the brick and mortar there with the old photographs and paintings going back centuries of the Mayflower people and all the important people that run these clubs. These clubs are dying off. Literally dying off as we speak. Nobody cares about these clubs anymore except the old men who populate these clubs. And the old men are not immortal. And one day they will die, probably sooner rather than later. Meanwhile, there are people out there who have created new associations. And these associations are the ones that matter. We ignore them because the clubs, of course, they control the media, and the clubs can write little press releases and they send them to the media, and then the media repeats them over and over again. But there's a new media out there, Cynthia. You're part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm part of it. Diane's part of it. A new media. You are going to get more responses on some of the videos that you make than CNN gets in some of their primetime programming. All right. That's the reality of the new media. The world doesn't go to CNN and MSNBC and NBC and CBS and ABC anymore for the news. They go elsewhere to alternative media platforms. There's a new club out there. BRICS is a new club. The G7 is one of those clubs, Cynthia. You know the G7, and they created another club of the wannabes called the G20. We'll bring in the 20 people that want to be the G7 but can't be because we won't let them. But they'll be there, and we'll feed them a little bit here. And you know what the G7 is when you subtract BRICS? The G20, when you take BRICS out, it's the G7. BRICS basically said, "Hey, we're the cool club. We're the guys out there that don't care about all the things that these old stupid white people care about. We're about everybody. We can invite the brown people. We can invite the yellow people. We can invite the poor white people. We can invite the white people that might have a speech impediment. We can invite the white people that might have a blotch on their face. We can invite humans, the imperfect humans, the real humans, not these calcified dinosaurs that are in these clubs." So yeah, there's clubs out there that they don't matter anymore. They literally don't matter. They are on their final legs. And all we have to do is wait for them to die and vote in new people. And the good news is they're all going to die really soon because they're really old people and they don't live healthy lives. They are poisoned by their hate and the bile that they have. So yeah, screw the clubs. Excuse my language. I'm all about the new associations. I'm about, and unfortunately, I'm at the age right now. I'm the age of the guys who invited me to the club back in the day. Back when I was a young whippersnapper, and you had guys that are 60 years old like me. Cigar. Hey, Scott, welcome to the club. Come on in, man. Have a seat here. Look at that painting. See, that painting's really cool here. We've been around for a long time, Scott. We have people come in from the Mayflower. You want some cognac, Scott? It's good cognac. It's really, how you enjoying this? Didn't enjoy it at all. That's why I didn't join the club. Not going to join the club. Those clubs today, all the guys are 30 years older. They're dropping dead. There's no young blood. No young blood. Nobody wants to be part of that club anymore. That's what I think of the club, Cynthia.
Okay.
Useless.
Okay. You're friendly with Dennis Kucinich. A number of years ago, when they did redistricting in Ohio, they pitted Dennis Kucinich against Marcy Kaptur. They wanted Marcy to win, even though as a Democrat, she was pro-life. They did not want Dennis Kucinich in the House anymore representing Ohio because he was not part of the club.
Yeah, and yet here's Dennis today running as an independent in the 7th District in Ohio. Probably going to go in and be a hell of a lot more influential than that stupid person that ran against him ever would be. What's her name? Nobody knows her name. Nobody cares about her. She doesn't matter. Who does? Dennis Kucinich. Why? He's not in the club, Cindy. He's not in the club. You can't be a winner today if you're in the club. The club is a giant anchor down your neck. The club stands for nothing but hate, war, violence, discrimination, prejudice. Nobody wants to be a member of that club anymore. And the people who are members of the clubs are the losers being ushered out of life. I talked about the cycles of elections in America. Unfortunately, America functions on 4-year national election cycles. It's going to take about 3 more national election cycles to purge America of this poison. All of the old idiots that are in the Congress right now will be dead in 12 years, guaranteed. Unless we invent a little immortality pill, they will all be dead. They will all be gone. And we need the new blood to come in and backfill it. It can happen, Cindy. The American people can be educated to stop believing in the poison that's being disseminated by mass media that is becoming less and less relevant. You are on the cutting edge of changing people's minds, Cynthia. You and I may not be here when the final conquering of the House of Representatives in the United States Senate does. I hope we both are, so we can dance the jig that we deserve to dance. But the point is, we are doing something right now. This is the right kind of revolution. This is a righteous revolution, not a violent resolution, a righteous revolution. And it's working. It's succeeding. The club is about to collapse, Cynthia. It's done. It's irrelevant.
Okay. I want to say one more thing about the club. And Diane knows very, very well. As a statewide candidate in New York, a number of years ago, a candidate needed only 15,000 signatures to get on the ballot to run for a statewide office. If they were a third party, our dear former governor, Andrew Cuomo, wanted to up the ante, so he tripled that. So a candidate running for a statewide office needs 45,000 signatures to run for office. You know how difficult it is to get 45,000 signatures? This is what they do to keep outsiders out.
And yet Diane got 70,000.
Right.
He worked her butt off.
Hey, you know what? I don't care. It's worth working your butt off. See, the only thing the club can do being the old stultified, calcified morons that they are, is make it difficult. But you know, when you're young and vibrant, you stand for something, you work your ass off and you do it. Throw all the obstacles in front of you. Why do you think I run obstacle course races every year? So I can get over the damn obstacle. Put them in front of me. Let's take down the obstacle. Put the brick wall in there. I'll run through it. And if I can't run through it, I'll be smart and go around it. But it doesn't matter. Diane Sare and everybody else isn't going to allow the club to dictate outcomes. All the club could do is make life miserable, because that's what they are, miserable people. Work through their misery, come out on the other end. And you know what? It's a brave new world out there. Screw the club, screw their rules. I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about doing what needs to be done to make them irrelevant. And you know what, Cynthia? They are increasingly irrelevant because Diane Sare did what they thought she could never do.
Right.
They tried to make it impossible for her. And Diane Sare went out there and did the impossible. Why? Because she knows she's on the right course. She knows she's on the righteous path. This is the path that true Americans will follow. And their time is over, Cynthia. All they can do is make life miserable. What are anything positive coming from that club? Name one positive thing coming from that club, and
There
there's
is
nothing.
none.
And
No,
the American
but I'll
youth
just say,
today,
they can't make you miserable. You choose to be miserable,
yeah.
right? Because no one can make you anything. That is your choice.
Well, my wife can make me miserable if I get her angry at me. So I have to work on making sure that. But that's my choice. You're right. That's right. It's my choice. So
Well, you know what things are important to care about. So
right.
So Diane, what's on your agenda as your campaign goes forward?
interestingly, I've already begun getting some quite interesting international press coverage. People are desperately looking for signs of sane life in the United States. Since New York has a huge number of immigrants, I think some of this is going to play back into the electorate here. And I actually have to run because I have something that begins at 11 that I'm speaking at, and then I have another interview coming up at 2, which is actually an American podcaster who's getting a lot more following because he interviews independent candidates. So yeah, I think Scott's right. This revolutionary process is going to hit in the United States. Actually, LaRouche said that years ago when the Berlin Wall came down. He said, this is nothing to when the transatlantic financial system comes down. Then you're going to see a real revolution. We're on the cusp of it. That's what makes it so dangerous, but also the potential is so great.
So Scott, you'll be gone for 45 days and you'll be back the middle of July, right?
July 20th. Yeah.
Okay. So when you come back, I'd love to do a show with you and you could give me, tell our audience what you did and what you learned. Would that
We'll
be
do it.
okay?
And then when I come back, maybe we'll even have a bigger following, and Diane Sare will come on our podcast. I mean, I know we're not big enough and influential enough, but maybe we can lure her on when we come back, and we can talk about her candidacy and the importance of what she's doing. Because Diane and I we're on, all three of us are on the same team, and that's Team Peace, Team Prosperity, and I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate you. Allow me to share space with Diane. And now we got to let Diane go off and do the difficult job of actually trying to win an election. So good luck, Diane.
Yes, good luck, Diane. We'll talk, and Scott, we'll talk when you come back. The best of luck, and please stay safe.
Safe's my middle name.
Okay. You guys have a great day.
Thanks.